Welcome everybody to Brain Training. This Brain Training session, part of the Bond to Build community. I'm your host, DeAndre Ricardo. Once again, it is May 9th, 2022. We have Michael Damon in the house. We have Michaela in the house. We have Liz in the house. We have JoJo Pa in the house. And this morning, afternoon, morning for everybody else, clip is me and JoJo talked about I just remember us talking about we were talking about quantum thinking. What were we talking about that last when we did the cafe?
Yeah.
We were talking about quantum thinking. So when I typed it up, guess who popped up? Dr. Joe Dispenza. So I was just listening to what he had to say. And his clip I was actually listening to for most of the week. So I just wanted to play this clip. It's real educational. I learned a lot just by listening to him. And so I just wanted to make it like an educational class today so we can learn because I'm learning as I watch it. So without further ado, let's uh let's see. Let me know if you can hear it. Did I do? I don't think I did. Hold on, let me do it again. I don't think I did that.
It's there. It just wasn't starting.
Okay. I didn't do the share sound part. That's why I keep missing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's all right. Let's try it again.
It's not enough to just have
Can you hear it?
a clear intention, because clear intentions have very little effect on the nature of reality. Most people don't know that they're moving in and out of the quantum field 7.8 times per second. That you're vibrating in and out of the field all the time, and every time you leave, you disappear, and when you come back, you disappear into that field of information, and you come back with information. But if you go out as the same person, you don't bring any new information back. Are you with me? If you look at quantum physics, the physics of possibility, it's really talking about the spiritual aspect of ourselves, because you couldn't explain a miracle, you couldn't explain a biological process, you couldn't explain a simple healing of a cut at this point without understanding the quantum model of reality. And that there are particles, which are matter, it's you and I, and everything in this physical world, and then there's energy. And that energy has a consciousness, it has an awareness, and that energy is a field of information that we are an extension of, that we have access to. And that we spend so much of our life looking outside of ourselves instead of looking inside of ourselves. And that we are really conditioned to look just for particles and matter instead of energy and information. And truly, when people reach the end of their beliefs or they're facing crisis in their life, that's the moment they start to turn within and start to ask the bigger questions. And if you were astute enough to look at this in moments of contemplation, if you were wanting to hide God anywhere, it would be a good place to hide. It would be within the human being, because everybody's looking outside of themselves, and we look for reasons to change and regulate our emotional states. We think that things and people and external things will really fulfill emotions that we're trying to change within us. And that truly, when we start to really investigate who we are and look to see how we do that and demystify it, I think once we start to demystify it, it can become a skill. And so Einstein was a super cool guy because he spent a lot of time inward. And at 12 years old, he asked himself this simple question: if I ride my bicycle at the speed of light and I turn my lamp on, I turn my headlight on, will it go on? And so he thought about that question every single day of his life. Every day of his life. He would go out in a boat on a lake as a child and lay on his back in the boat and look up at the sky and think about this. And he was building models of understanding. He was working his best to be able to figure out how light and energy were related. He did it for 10 years. He was possessed by the concept. And finally, he was working as a third-rate clerk in a Swiss patent office, and he was watching this man fix the roof across the way. And he just paused for a moment, and he was watching him, and the moment he was watching him, he got this incredible vision. And he understood how light and energy were related. It was a very abstract vision. And it was so abstract and so dimensional that he had to go back to school to learn the mathematics to be able to explain what he saw. And his wife, his first wife, was an amazing scientist, and she helped him with a lot of the mathematics. And so when Einstein began to figure it out, he narrowed it down to that one simple equation, that E equals mc squared, energy and matter related, and the currency converter is the speed of light. And so it became very interesting because when Einstein published his papers on relativity, he didn't say like, hey, this person said this and this person said this, and I'm going to footnote this person do that. He just said, ladies and gentlemen, this is how it is. And it rocked the scientific community because he didn't really need anybody else as a reference. He had a discovery, and his discovery was so unique. And his brain really was wired for the understanding of light, and light was the ceiling of this reality. And so Einstein and Planck started doing these really interesting experiments where they were taking energy and they were putting energetic impulses into metals. And what they were looking to see is if electrons behave the same way as the very large. In other words, when an apple falls from the tree, it falls in a very specific way. It falls towards the center. It falls towards the larger body. So he reasoned, well, if we disturb electrons, and him and Planck were doing these experiments, if we disturb these electrons, then they should fall just like an apple falling from the tree towards the nucleus. It should be predictable, just like it's predictable in Newtonian physics and classical physics. Well, when they started disturbing the electrons, something very unusual happened. The electron gained energy, then it lost energy. And it gained energy and it lost energy. And it gained energy and it lost energy. And instead of it falling like a ball rolling down a hill, it was like a ball rolling down steps. And all of a sudden, they became very aware that the subatomic world, the very tiny, didn't behave like the very large world. And so then they started to look for the electron. They started to try to measure it. And everywhere they looked for it, it appeared. And when they turned their back on it and they no longer looked to measure it, it went from a particle that collapsed, called collapsing the wave function, back into energy. Now this was a revolutionary moment because this meant that subjective mind, your mind has an effect on the objective world, that mind and matter are somehow correlated. And so this birth of quantum physics came along, and this quantum physics experiments say that you cannot do a quantum physics experiment without an observer around. In other words, a mind always has to be present because it will influence the outcome. You with me? So now, that invisible field of spirit, that invisible field of information and energy, somehow you, as an individual, can influence the nature of reality with your mind. So now Einstein had a lot of trouble with this because he said, God doesn't play dice and it doesn't work like this, but his brain was wired for light. And so he had the abstraction and he was getting the download of information, understanding the field of light. And the quantum physicists were saying, well, actually there's a field of information beyond space and time, beyond light, where everything is unified. And you can take two photons that have been somehow related in a specific atom and shoot them to the opposite ends of the universe. And the moment you affect one photon at the exact same time, the other one is affected. So they were being connected or affected in a realm faster than the speed of light. In other words, it would take time if you affected one for the other one to be affected. But if they were beginning to be affected at the exact same time, they were connected in a realm beyond physical reality. Are you with me? And so when the movie What the Bleep came out, and we basically made an effort to show that your mind has an effect on reality, and that in order for you to begin to change your reality, you got to change your mind and change the way you live your life. And we wanted people to become inspired by the process of creation, really give it a shot. And that that independent of your gender, of your race, of the color of your skin, of your intellectual ability, independent of your past, independent of your age, that on some level we are all divine creators, and that these models of reality that have separated individuals have all been built on human beings living in a very limited state of mind. And so when quantum physics was born and the whole concept of reality began to unfold, people started to really challenge the nature of reality, and that concept that you are somehow connected because you are made of photons and atoms and electrons, that on some level you are an organization, a community of 70 trillion to 120 trillion cells, and all of those cells are made up of atoms and molecules and chemicals, and all of those are working in a coherent form to express yourself as a physical body. But most people don't know that they're moving in and out of the quantum field 7.8 times per second. That you're vibrating in and out of the field all the time, and every time you leave, you disappear. When you come back, you disappear into that field of information, and you come back with information. But if you go out as the same person, you don't bring any new information back. Are you with me? And if you can begin to observe a vision that represents a future, and you can hold steadfast to that vision, and you can see that vision clearly in your mind, and every day you understand where you place your attention is where you place your energy, then you would be investing your energy into the future. And the image that you see could literally be the template for trillions and trillions of atoms to organize into patterns of information called an event in your life. And so, but it's not enough to just have a clear intention, because clear intentions have very little effect on the nature of reality. That the driving force that couples the co-maiden, the handmaiden to all of that is an elevated emotion. And so when you combine that clear intention with an elevated emotion, it is the elevated emotion that begins to amplify the field around your body. And in that moment, you become more energy and less matter. And if you understand then that the emotion then is the handmaiden to the creative process, that means that you would have to feel whole before your healing. That would mean that you would have to feel abundance before your wealth. That means you would have to feel awe before the mystical moment. That would mean you'd have to feel love before your new relationship. That would mean you'd have to feel empowered before your success. And that means then when we do this properly, then we're no longer functioning as materialists. We are literally function as quantum minds. And only when you're truly conscious and truly aware are you beginning to affect the nature of reality. And taking small moments in your busy life to understand that when your consciousness merges with a greater consciousness, when you're connected to Source, you will emulate the divine. And how would the divine live if it was you? Thanks for listening.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that was the clip. It's a lot of information. But it still taking me a few times to listen to it, but it's just a lot. Like what it did for me, it kept me focused throughout the week. It was like, because like I said, I've been starting to write, take a notebook. I have 2 notebooks now, so I write my thoughts down, how I'm feeling, and I write my goals are, and then my intention for them and why. And the more I do it, I find that the more I do it, like especially when I'm at the job, I find that it helps me stay focused. It gives me a feeling of, it's almost like I'm not there. It's almost like I'm not working at all. And it's just, I don't know, when I read what I think, and then why I think a certain way, and then my goals and why certain goals are very important, it just gives me a better feeling. And the more I do it, the feeling just gets better and better. And it's like, somehow this is helping me do that more, just listening to this clip. So I can't explain it the way he explains it, but it's something.
I think you are explaining it the way he explains it, because What's so cool about Joe is that he really gets that we have to connect to a higher dimension if we're going to create something new, something different, something more aligned with our truth. And so what does that mean? Like he talks about leaving materialism to the degree that we do it behind. And a big part of materialism is that we want to figure things out. We want to have a name for something, right? Vocabulary is really important. We want to get an A on our paper. But what this information is asking us to do is to go in. And when you go into the inner landscape, it doesn't give a shit about the English language, the German language, the Japanese language, Russian, none of it, none of that. And it is more of what I'm hearing you express, DeAndre, which is I have this feeling of what he's talking about, and it's working for me. Bang. Yeah. Yeah. So no need to say, oh, I can't express it like he did. No, you got it. You got it. Yeah. And that's what we all want to learn how to do, you know. How do we get to that?
I was processing what he meant by us going in and out of the quantum
Field.
How did you interpret that? Like, how would you explain that, what he meant by that?
Yeah, so what's so cool about, you know, the new science, quantum physics, theoretical physics, is it actually gives for materialists a way to understand what we call the other world in indigenous wisdom, okay? So in our indigenous self, which we all still have in us, it's just that it doesn't get used in the same way as this material 3D stuff does. But we all have that in us, which is that we know there's something else going on. There's something else going on around us. We can't see it, but we can feel it. It's like the wind. You know, you've had those times where you were thinking about somebody and bam, they call. Or for a couple of days, you were just feeling something like, I don't know what it is, but I just feel good, you know. And then on the third day, boom, a present shows up, a surprise shows up. You meet up with somebody that, you know, you really connect with, whatever, right? So all of that kind of that energetic field is what they're calling the quantum field. In indigenous world, we talk about the other world or other worlds. And we believe in our experience as indigenous people and wisdom keepers that we can learn how to access that, how to connect to that, because we believe it exists. And I think that's what Dr. Joe is wanting to teach. He's letting you know scientifically you're going in and out of that world. Now, people who go into that world and get stuck, we call that schizophrenia. Yeah, and other forms of mental illness. But in the indigenous world, we understand what happened is they got in there. Sometimes, and that's why you hear about so many young people, because it's usually because of some drug they took. They're in a situation where they're traumatized. It's overwhelming fear. It could be something that happened when they were a child and never got addressed. And they got into that world, and at some point, it's hard for them to come out. Yeah. And so when they're talking about, I can see this person, I'm hearing this person, that's really going on. You know, it's not like it's made up. It is a reality that they are experiencing. And one of the reasons why, you know, some of them become violent is because in the other worlds that exist out there, the levels of energy and that he's kind of talking about with, you know, light and quantum physics, there's this level that we call the twilight level. And it's the first level we go into, like even when you meditate, why it's so hard for people to meditate? Because when you first say, okay, I'm going in, you feel very uncomfortable. there's going to be this kind of disturbing, disruptive feelings that you get. And you're told, just keep focusing on the mantra, just keep saying your mantra, you know, it's like, just keep focused so you can break through that twilight zone. And then you're into more of what we call the open field. But people who have schizophrenia or get stuck into that twilight zone, that's a very dense area. That's the area that is absent the connection to your soul. Yeah. That's why you don't play around with this stuff. You don't want to play around with indigenous work and, you know, call themselves shamans and this and that. And I just be like, because there's a whole tradition and a learning about what you have to do when you're connecting with those fields. So that's what Joe is really talking about, is to let us know there really are these other worlds, these worlds that are around us. And you can learn how to access your inner world, your inner landscape, so that you can change up what's happening in your subconscious so that it doesn't block you to, you know, manifesting your dreams. Yeah. And do you all know the story about Dr. Joe Dispenza, how he became so popular? It's a great story. So he's riding his bike and he gets hit by a car, and he's in the hospital, paralyzed from like the neck down. And they tell him, well, you know, you probably get some feeling back, but you're just never going to be able to walk again. And Dr. Joe was at a young age, I think he was only 28 or something like that. And he's just like, oh, hell no. And he begins this meditative practice where he is in his mind sending energy to his legs, to his blood system, to his muscles. You know, he's doing this like everyday discipline, like spending hours, like, you know, and 6 months later, he walks out of the hospital. So he has actually had a real experience about how the body wants to heal itself, and that if we put a focus on that, an intention in that, and a practice in that, then like this miracle can happen. Yeah, it's really cool stuff.
Yeah, I just found out about him because the more I look for certain things, he always usually pops up, and I was like, well, okay, let me listen to him again. So I just love the way he breaks stuff down. Like the way him and like Bob Proctor, like people like that, for me, they break it down in such a way that it's like, okay, like I can understand like real, like I guess the stuff would be like quantum physics is real difficult to grasp, but the way he explains it, I can see it, you know. So that's.
Let me just say, from my novice point of view, it brought back. I'm going to say this is science. When I was in high school, neutrons, protons, electrons, all of those words are. I'm familiar with them, but as to how to apply them in my daily life, I think, you know, with doing this is just opening my mind to figure out how to say some of the things that you think, but you don't understand why you thought this. This is giving words to those thoughts, those ideas, those things that happen that, you know, you're like, okay, is this real or is it not? Because yesterday, well, Friday and Saturday, there was the Kentucky Derby. I don't know if any of you watched that or whatever.
Oh, I didn't realize it was this weekend. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
I said I didn't realize it was this weekend. Okay.
Yeah, a friend of mine kind of, you know, hit me to it. I didn't either. But so I watched it yesterday. Was it yesterday? No, not yesterday, but Saturday. And then I got on the internet, and all of a sudden there was this article about Black women purchasing horses. And I'm saying, now, is this real? All of a sudden, this is the same day, I'm connecting the two, and it's like, wow. To me, that explains the unknown as to things happen. And I guess they happen, they happen for a reason. But getting back to what I was saying, I'm just using this as a tool to look at things differently, give different meaning and words to, what you do every day. And that's what I like. I love about it. Like I told you before, I'm not really a reader, but I'm more of a listener. I listen for things that apply to, what I'm doing now or what I did yesterday. And I'm just enjoying this from a different perspective, in other words.
It made me think about what you just said, Liz, about the electrons and protons and all that stuff. And when I think about the falling into alignment, so I kind of equated that to falling in and out of the quantum field. And then I'm like, it made me picture like our neutrons and electrons and all that stuff kind of being our key, our to kind of unlock that world. Because when you're emotionally trying to tie in, you're tying in your energy to try to tap into that stuff. And you saying that about the science class made me think about that. I've never thought about the energy in us kind of in that way. But I'm just like, that's what we're aligning. It's not trying to physically align yourself, but kind of aligning your energetic field to that, to that image, as he was saying. It also made me think about Moon Knight, the Marvel series, because he was kind of locked between two different versions of himself, and they thought about that reality, and it made me think about a line from the new Doctor Strange movie as well, which I won't reveal much, but it made me think about that
Seen
too.
it.
They always are on this. They always are just right on with that stuff. So.
The multiverse.
And something, YouTube is my TV. I don't have a TV, but YouTube, I find everything on YouTube. I'll stay on YouTube all day. Anyway, there's this group of I'm learning there's this group of Black people that and they're talking, this language. This is the language they're talking. And it's like more every time I'm seeing more and more. And I'm saying, I didn't realize we were that. And these are younger people though. These are younger people that's talking about energy and all of that. And it's like, wow. So anyway, I just thought I would share that.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. We're living in a time now, and I'm a geek, so I'm a science geek. Like, I wasn't into science in school totally, but I appreciated it. But when the quantum physicist stuff shows up, it was like in the 90s when there becomes more talk about it. Deepak Chopra is one of the first ones that really begins to meld quantum technology with how to create abundance. His whole book on creating affluence is really based on quantum understanding. And so I got really hooked onto it. And then the show that came up after 2000, How the Universe Works, like, I love all that stuff, right? Because it's so connected into the spiritual teachings that I keep and that I learn about. And so it's almost like we've gone almost full circle, because on one of our conversations several months ago, we talked about, you shared a video that gave that information, DeAndre, about how the alchemists became the scientists, became the physicists and the chemists, and that, Sir Isaac Newton was a grand alchemist, and that the people who were the astrologers became the astronomers. So all of these things that had these very deep spiritual roots, then when the age of enlightenment comes around, they shift into its science and they begin to burn out anything having to do with spirituality. But when Einstein does his thing, it like, boom, opens the door again for that kind of connection, so that it's like we've come this full circle. And young people have been exposed to much more information and understanding and ideas because of you know, people like Joe Dispenza, Caroline Meese, you know, even Ayanna Van Zandt, have been bringing, you know, more of this message about the fact that, you know, you don't have to be a victim to your life, that you really can co-create, that you can shift things up. And I think it's something that we've had to do as Black people in America, because how do you survive slavery if you ain't shifted something up? But we've not given ourselves permission to really value what it is that we know and to understand it. And I think we're in a time now where we're moving into that. Like we're ready to claim, oh, this is how, you know, this is what Harriet Tubman was really doing. This is how she could go back and get people out of slavery and not get caught. Oh, this is how she did it, you know. So these levels of consciousness become really important to us now, which is delicious. I think it's just wonderful, because there was a time when you couldn't find these books in a bookstore. You know, you had to go digging. They didn't even have a shelf for this kind of information. Let's hear from the young person. What are you thinking, Michaela?
I don't really know what I'm thinking personally. I have to go back and watch this video because it took a minute to process a little bit.
Absolutely.
I am not a science person at all, so
Yeah, it takes time. This one takes time.
yeah. So I think I have to go back and listen. But like every point you guys are making, I agree with, and like Dad had mentioned about the what was it? Yeah, aligning your emotions with your image kind of clicked with I guess the state I'm in now was a bit of a realization, like, okay, I just have to come to terms that like I can't keep thinking that I have to seek out something. It just has to naturally come, and it'll come when it's needed and deserved.
I believe that.
Yeah, a lot of these videos, I just put them out there because not that I know them, but it's just, it gives you something to think about and something to listen to. Like you can click on the link. I mean, not click on the link, but go to that link and just listen to it over and over again. And just, because I'm learning as everybody else is learning. So I don't play them because I know it. It's just because I thought it sounded fantastic once I started listening to it. And I'm like, oh, okay, I see what he's saying, kind of. But
It's thought provoking.
yeah, it gives you a good, like I said, I have a list that I listen to, but I'll include this into the list that I listen to like almost daily. So
I've seen him talk on so many different things. So it was just like, I mean, so many topics I've seen him talk on. So it was just like, I almost felt like I was transitioning from the last thing I watched of him to this, because I don't think I've ever heard him talking about this
in this way. Yeah.
Reviewed in a very kind of like in a box type conversation.
yeah, that's why I say a lot of stuff that I type in, he pops up at the top. It's always a lot of stuff that I type in. I don't be looking for him. He just pops up at the top. So.
And it is brain training, you know. And Michaela, like when I first listened to Deepak Chopra Creating Affluence, and he's breaking down this stuff about quantum physics, I had to listen to it about 100 times. And Deepak was great because he said, listen, you don't need to think that you're supposed to understand all this. You don't even need to really, quote unquote, listen to it. Just put it on, like, you know, I'm old school, so it was on a cassette. Put it on put the cassette into your car, and as you're driving back and forth to work, just have it playing. He said, because you will get the information will come into you, but just listen to it. Don't think, oh, this is too hard, I can't understand it, and you put it aside. No, he said, just put it on, go about your task, in the house or clean or whatever, but it will come. And that was the truth. And I did that. And all of a sudden one day I'm like, oh, that's what that means. Or, oh yeah, I really love that phrase. There was one phrase that he would say, I would just say it over and over and over again. So it is kind of like a training. It's like we're actually giving ourselves permission to not know so that we can learn. And I think that's one of the biggest problems I have with regular school system. They actually make you feel like if you don't get it right away or on the second or third time, then that means you can't get it. And that's not true. Everybody just needs to, if something's challenging, give them all the time they need over and over and over again. There's actually a Japanese educator that does that. He's created learning processes like that. So kids stay on whatever it is they need for as long as they need, before they go to the next set of things they need to learn. And it makes such a difference. And I just wanted to share the 2 books that I have in my library of Joe's that I find really helpful. This one, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself.
That sounds
really cool. How to Lose Your Mind and Create a New One.
So he does have books. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so this one,
Okay.
that one's pretty popular. And then this one is a newer one. It's called Becoming Supernatural. You see the sign of the caduceus, all about healing. How common people are doing the uncommon. And just more examples, lots of charts and things.
So I should put those in the links as well
really
in
good
the
stuff.
description.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll send
That's
you.
good. Yeah.
I'll send you the titles. But yeah, it's just really good stuff. And just quickly, personal story for me. The gift of this morning is because and this is the thing too, doing this work, and like I said, I've been doing it very consciously for over 20 years. You're going to, go to a level and you feel good and everything's going fine. And then something's going to happen that's going to disrupt you. And what that disruption means, it's not that you haven't done your work. It means it's time to go to the next level. And so that's what's been going on for me in April. And one of the ways it's showing up is with my hypertension. So the way I was able to handle it, it's not working to the degree that I would like it to be. So I'm like, okay, you've got to open up to learning something new, something more, And what this video did to remind me about is, what is it I want to create? Like, where is it that I'm going? Do I just want my blood pressure at staying normal with the amount of medication that I'm now taking? Or do I want to get off the medication altogether? What happened to that dream? Why am I thinking that I've got to be dependent upon the medication in order to manage my hypertension? And so this just reminded me, like, oh, that's right. If that's what I'm believing, that, it's got to take the pill, got to take more of the pill and more of the pill, because eventually that's what happens. Like, you just keep taking more and you get a bigger amount. But at the end of the day, you're going to be so dependent on the pill that you're not going to do the other things that are really required if you're going to manage your health. And so, yeah, this video today is reminding me, you need to go in and you need to set a new intention for your wellness. Yeah. So thank you, DeAndre. This was cool. I needed that reminder. Yeah.
So what is actually quantum physics? What is that term? What does that mean?
Sure. Just to break it down, an easy way to break it down is If you look at everything that's material, say the table in front of you, and you put your hand on it, your feeling of it is that it's solid, okay? But when we take a microscope and we go look into what is that solid mass made of, that's when we start to see neutrons, protons, electrons, all the things that you see in that typical model of an atom, right? This one's moving around the nucleus and this and that, it's basic physics, right? What quantum physics is about, let's get an even better microscope. Let's go see what's inside a neutron.
Right, okay. Okay. I get
So
it.
it's like the elevator going down into more and more and more and more. And now there's a theory that beyond these particles, they now call them, because that's what they detect, these particles, that's smaller than an atom, particles. What are the particles made of? They've now come down to vibrating strings. That
So-
we are essentially, like that table in front of you is essentially these vibrating strings of energy.
Mm.
And the rate that they vibrate, the sound they make, how they vibrate, that's what eventually creates that solid mass in front of you.
So it's more of a dissecting to a point?
It's a smaller component of your physical reality.
And I like, it says changing your reality, because that, all that's involved with, the, what quantum physics is, it's another way of thinking,
Yes.
So.
Yeah, and like they said too, this was really what blew me away, because I knew this. Like some of the stuff is just common sense, right? But when the scientists give it to you, then you feel validated.
Mm.
What they've learned in quantum physics studies is when you go to do your experiment to look at something, it shows up because you're there. When you turn your attention away from it, it disappears.
Yeah, he said that in that video, and I was blown away. It was like the more you wanted to see it, the more the particles showed up. But when you stop paying attention to them, they disappear. And I was like, that's cold.
And then what it means too is, because in science, it's all about not influencing the outcome, right? Science is supposed to be everything like in a little box. But what quantum physics tells us is you're going to influence the outcome. Your presence is going to influence the outcome. And I think for us, in terms of, growing our brain, moving ourselves into what I call this liberated lifestyle, that means that we actually have the ability to shift up our situations. That it's not dependent upon the things that we have been conditioned to believe it's dependent upon. Like me with this pill, like, oh yeah, if I just keep taking my blood pressure pill, my blood pressure gonna come down. Well, what happens when you're taking a pill and it's still going up? Oh, something else must be going on, And so it's like letting go of our dependence on what is right in front of us, what's in the 3D, and realizing that there's another influence, there's another energetic going on that we can learn how to use for our benefit. Yeah.
So I'm just looking at this. It says your mind has an effect on your reality. So
Absolutely. So if I believe that I'm stupid and I'm broken and, like the video we had from that motivational speaker, what's his name? Lee. God, I'm blocking on his name. The black motivational speaker. Les Brown. When that teacher says to him, don't you ever call yourself dumb. Don't you ever talk about yourself in that way. Because he had accepted it. I'm the 2 Ds and he's the dumb one, And that's how he began to learn that he had to change up his belief system so that he could be successful in life. But he had just been believing, yeah, I'm the stupid one, and accepting that. And think about that in our lives, how much of what we've been told by a test, by a family member, by a stranger, by television, YouTubes, about who we are, what we're supposed to be. You know, and so much of that we take in unconsciously. You know, like me, I'll do aging, right? So if I watched all of those commercials about you shouldn't have wrinkles and you shouldn't be doing this and, oh, take this and you're going to live forever, you know, if I really listened to all that stuff, I'd be crazy. I would be so insane. And I do have to work every day to make a decision about how do I want to experience myself aging? Do I want to be someone who ends up in a nursing home? Or do I want to die like my friend did in her bed, going happily, surrounded by loving friends? Yeah. What am I choosing? Right? And that's what we get to do. That's what we get to do. Yeah. We can choose it.
I was curious if our thoughts create like sound waves or vibrations. Then that kind of makes sense then when you think about the quantum level. And if it's like strings of vibrating sound or frequency, then I can see how your thoughts vibrating in a way that align with that frequency will change things. And then it also made me think about the saying, people say vibrate higher, meaning kind of like, and I'm just like, oh, like there's a physical part to that too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's like, you know, Deepak just talks about this so beautifully. I'll try to find that piece that he does. It might be on a video. I don't know. You know, he's been around for so long, so a lot of his stuff hasn't translated into YouTube, but there might be something. But anyway, he talks about, and this is from ancient Indian religious texts called the Vedic teachings. It's one of the oldest written religious texts on the planet. And in the Vedas, it teaches that everything comes out of this void, out of this field. Rumi talks about it, the great poet that people mostly know, the Sufi poet Rumi. He talks about this field. And it's in this field, this void of nothingness, that everything is born. And so now that the physicists and the astronomers and the planetary scientists have a picture of a black hole, that it really does exist, because that too was coming from Einstein, but they didn't have any proof of it. Then Stephen Hawking started talking about it, but they still didn't have any proof of it. Well, just a couple of years ago, we actually got a picture of a black hole. And it's this black hole where the rules of physics and science breaks down. Time is very different. The experience of time is very different in the black hole. And it's this gravitational force that is so strong that it could suck in another planet, you know, could suck in the whole universe if it wanted to, you know. But what does that mean? That means that, again, we have proof that ancient people kind of knew what they were talking about, that things are coming out of a void. And so inside all of us, we have this void energy where we can go and manifest things that it's unbelievable. You know, how did that happen? How did you do that? You know, like Oprah Winfrey talks about very clearly about connecting with her God. She talked about getting down on her knees. She's a billionaire, but she get on her knees every night and she stay connected to her God. She said, I was a little girl from, you know, Mississippi, where there was all these lynchings and stuff, more lynchings going on than any place else on the planet. You know, I started out with nothing. And here I am as a billionaire. As a Black woman, how does that happen? So again, she's another proof, another evidence that there is a way that we can connect with that energy of the truth of who we are. Yeah.
Now,
sacred contract over it there's another layer to it, but at least you start with knowing that everything is possible.
I'm thinking right now, people that have like schizophrenia and delusional, to me, that almost ties into quantum physics, because they have a connection with something that we are not aware of, but they can see it, and it means something to them. And I don't know if they've researched that to find out. People they may not be crazy. They may see something that we just cannot, evidently they do see something that we don't see, but I'm just saying there could be some type of explanation for that relates to, the unknown, I would guess.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And the one thing too with quantum physics theory and understanding is about the brain, which is why Joe Dispenza, spent so much time breaking it down for himself. Like he wanted to understand more about how did I do this? How did I heal myself, And so, most people in our field of mental health, the thing we leave out when somebody shows up having had an episode where they hurt themselves or they hurt somebody else, they never do a blood test. They go right to the pharmaceuticals, okay? Because the thing is, you don't want them to hurt themselves or hurt anybody, but they skip out on doing the blood tests. And so back in the 60s, this guy discovered that people who were having schizophrenic episodes seem to have very low levels of niacin. Okay? Very low levels of niacin. He did this treatment, and a person who had been delusional and hallucinating for years, all of a sudden it stopped. I know a doctor in Milwaukee who's my doctor, his name is Dr. Fox, who has done that with a woman who started when she was 5 years old. And he's helped her heal. And she now goes around and she does talks to people about this, the fact that there is this chemical imbalance, the absence of something that they need so that they can pull themselves back out of that other world. And niacin seems to be one of the things that can have you be off balance. And so again, there's more stuff to learn, more stuff to discover about that interplay between how our brain functions and how we connect to, these other worlds, or what in theoretical physics, they call it the parallel universes. Mm-hmm. What Marvel Cinematic Universe calls it is the multiverse. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Very interesting stuff.
If nobody else has anything else, I'd like to thank you all for this morning again. Like I said, that video, you may want to watch it 100 times or whatever, just to get the grasp of what he's talking about. But the more I watched it, the more it kept me kind of fun. It really kept me focused, because it's like, okay, as long as you keep focused, and it started to work with me. Like I could see my vision, and it gave me this feeling like I wanted more and more. So thank you all for coming. I will include the link to the video. The link to those books will be in the description as well. And thank you for brain training again.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And there will be a Creators Cafe tonight at 4 p.m. Pacific time. I did change the name on the website, and I just got to do it on the event too.
Oh, you changed the name? Okay, that's right. That's right. Okay.
Creators Cafe.
All right. I love the last one. I love them every time I go. So
yeah, we had a good time.
Yep. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Be well, be safe.
Oh, Mike, the Friday thing.
Thank you.
Did you do it Friday?
I did not. No.
Okay, good. I didn't miss it again. Okay.
I know. Neither did I. I said, if I don't see anything out there, he didn't do it. Okay, whenever.
Yeah, good. Okay. Thank you all.
Talk to y'all later.
You are welcome.